In GitHub Desktop, if you click on File, we have two options. One is New Repository and another one is Add Local Repository. At times, it creates confusion which option to use in which specific scenario. In this lesson, I'm going to clarify that with simple hands-on examples. Conceptually, creating new repository is for projects starting from scratch, where GitHub Desktop creates or makes a new project folder for your code and it initializes the Git. So when you're creating a project, you use this new repository option, your project folder gets created, you start working inside that folder, adding your code, doing the modification, and then you can push the changes of this repository to Git or GitHub. While in case of add local repository, the scenario is little bit different. Add local repository is for the scenario when your code already exists in a folder on your computer. GitHub Desktop then either initializes Git within that existing folder or simply starts managing an already existing Git repository. So in case of add local repository, there could be two scenarios. A folder which has code and Git is also initialized over there, or the folder is having code, but it does not have Git initialized. In both of the scenarios, we can use add local repository. But in case of new repository, as we told, we are going to start from scratch. Even the project folder also, we are going to create using GitHub Desktop. Let us try to understand with simple examples. Here I'm in GitHub Desktop, clicking on File. I'm clicking on New Repository. I have a local folder selected under local path and I'm going to create a repository and naming it as a new repository for clarity. Clicking on Create Repository. So right now, just the repository is created. From here, what I can do, I can just right click on this, click on Show in Explorer. So we can see this particular folder is created. And one thing, if I do over here, if I click on View, Show, select this hidden items, we can see the Git initialization is done by GitHub Desktop. This .git folder is there, and inside that Git related all the files and folders are created. Now this is done by GitHub Desktop. So in real life scenario, what we would do, we would open this particular folder using our ID, whether it is Python ID, Java ID, or any language ID. We will perform the coding over here. Now, when required using GitHub Desktop, we can push in the changes from here. I would simulate that scenario as well. Let me add some files. Let us assume these are some artifacts. It could be your Java file, Python file, anything. Let me add few dummy lines, saving it, opening this one as well, saving this one also. Now, if I go back to GitHub Desktop, I can see these are my changes. Now I can commit them and I can push to my remote as well. Let me do that. Committing to the main branch. You can notice by default, it has selected the main branch. Click on commit. We can publish this repository to GitHub. Let me do that. Unchecking this, I don't want it as private. Publish repository. Let me check my repositories now. You can see this repository is here inside GitHub. Now let's think about add local repository. In this same folder, we are going to create two folders. One where Git is not initialized and the other where Git is initialized. For that, I'm going to use Git for Windows. So here, I'm creating one directory, local repo without Git, and creating another directory, local repo with Git. Navigating inside this local repo with Git, performing git init inside this. It has initialized empty Git repository in this particular location. If I go inside the Explorer, we can see this .git folder and it has all the required artifacts inside this. Now, what I'm going to do, the same content, whatever I have here, I'm going to paste inside these two folders, these two projects rather. This is the one which has Git, and this is the one which does not have. Now, Let me go back to GitHub Desktop and use this option, add local repository. First, I will choose the one where git init is already done. Now, let me go back to Git and I'm going to add the files over here using git add, adding a commit message, git commit -m, initial commit of the project files. You can see over here, two files changed. One is sample1.txt, another is sample2.txt. The other one does not have git initialized, so we cannot commit it from here. Now I'm opening GitHub Desktop. First, I'm going to add the local repository which has git initialized. Clicking on File, Add Local Repository, click on Choose, selecting the local repo with git, click on Select Folder, click Add Repository. Here, if I go to history section, we can see this commit message and the files which were changed. So we can directly push these changes to our remote repository. Let me do that. Publish repository, uncheck this, click on publish repository. Now this one is available in GitHub. Let us check. We can see local repo with Git. Going back to GitHub Desktop, as the next step, we are going to add the local repository without Git. Click on File, Add Local Repository, click on Choose, selecting this particular project folder, click on Select Folder, click on Add Repository. Now, in this case, you can see GitHub Desktop is telling us that this directory does not appear to be a Git repository. Would you like to create a repository here instead? Yes. In that case, what would happen? It perform the git initialization. Now, if I show you this particular folder, this local repo without git, it does not have anything apart from these two text files. Going back to GitHub Desktop, click on Create a Repository. I'm leaving the other options as is, clicking on this button, Create Repository. If I go back to the folder over here, we can see this .git folder is created and this .git attributes file is also created. Going back to GitHub Desktop, if I click on history, by default, this is the initial commit message created by GitHub Desktop, and we can push these changes to the remote repository. Now here, if I want to customize, suppose I don't want this .git attributes to be there in my remote repository, what we can do, we can just undo these changes, undo commit, right click, ignore file, perform one initial commit, go to history. Now publish the repository, uncheck this, publish repository. Let's go to the GitHub website, refresh this. Now we have the local repo without Git. Now we know while using GitHub Desktop in which scenario we need to use this new repository. When we are working from the scratch, we are even creating the project folder itself from the GitHub Desktop, and in which specific scenarios we are going to use add local repositories. In case we have existing code and the git is initialized in the code folder, or maybe the git is not initialized in the code folder, but we have some sample codes and we want to create a repository out of it using GitHub Desktop.